This is basically a Ponzi scheme. The fiat dollar system, which is debt-based, and the money printing that steals your time and your purchasing power, is a Ponzi scheme because it needs money printing. It needs to steal every day from you to exist. You don't have to be a drone or a cog in the machine. You don't have to have your wealth, health, and time stolen from you. It doesn't have to be like that. And he spent all his life working as a doctor, building his wealth, saving his wealth. Let's call it 40 years. So 40 years of wealth and time spent building that. Did the government refund him his 40 years? No, they cannot. For the last 100 years, the dollar has lost over 90% of its purchasing power. You might have more fiat or US dollars nominally, but that's just monopoly money. My mother bought her house for like $27,000. That same house is now worth maybe $300,000 to $400,000. Is that house 20 times more valuable? The biggest protest you can do is to
Welcome back to the show. Today, we're joined by Caliph, who has his own Bitcoin podcast. Caliph, before we dive in, would you be able to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you?
Sure. Hey guys, hello to Finn's audience. My name's Caliph. I'm the creator and host of the Real Hard Money podcast. It's a Bitcoin only podcast because that's the real story of this generation. I'm a former Java developer. I'm a father and also a digital marketer. And I use all of those things to combine and inform my journey into educating the masses. So I'm a big Bitcoin advocate and happy to be here.
And your channel reflects that too. For everyone watching, I'll put Caliph's links in the description below. I always like to start here, Caliph. Where was the moment, or was there a moment where you really realized something about money or the world just didn't make sense to you anymore?
I think I was underwater, like most people, on that idea. Even if you had an inkling inside, like things weren't fair, like taxes and, you know, all the prices going up, you just thought that's how the way the world was, kind of like the way the sun comes up. And it wasn't until I studied Bitcoin, until I found Bitcoin, it made sense that what was happening was not right. It's not the natural order of things. And there's a different way to do it, a second way, and a way to opt out. And, you know, these things, you don't have to be a drone or a cog in the machine. You don't have to have your wealth, health, and time stolen from you. It doesn't have to be like that. We don't have to live in a hyper-capitalized situation or civilization. So I didn't really understand what money was until I got to Bitcoin. And Bitcoin taught me about economics, macroeconomics, the history of money. Mike Maloney has a good series about the history of money. And that taught me a heck of a lot, that fiat is currency. It is not money. Gold and silver were money for thousands of years. You know, I knew gold was valuable. I knew silver was valuable, but I didn't know why. And I didn't know the difference between what money was and what currency is. And I didn't know anything about Austrian economics. I didn't know, I wasn't an economics major. I was a computer developer. So yeah, I didn't understand what money was until I understood why Bitcoin was created.
You mentioned your background and ultimately that you were just going through life as everyone is, kind of unaware of what money really is. You mentioned there at the start, getting your time stolen, your health stolen, your wealth stolen. What do you mean by that? Because I think a lot of people maybe hear they're getting their time stolen, but don't actually realize what that means. So would you be able to go into a bit more detail around that?
Yeah. A good example I tell my son when I try to explain this concept of time being stolen is when I lived in Miami, I met a gentleman in my lobby of my building. He was an Argentinian man, and he had his daughter live in the same building. And we got to talking, and I was wondering why he was there, and he told me he had to relocate because he basically lost everything where he was, and his daughter was helping him out now. I was like, really, and we started learning more about his past, and he was a doctor, and he spent all his life working as a doctor, building his wealth, saving his wealth. Let's call it 40 years, right? So 40 years of wealth and time spent building that. Time is our most valuable asset. Without time, nothing else matters. If you are not alive, then game over, right? So he then told me that the Argentinian government and the currency collapsed many times. But by the time it was the third collapse, he had basically nothing to show for it. So, did the government refund him his 40 years? No, they cannot. Only God can do that. So, that's what I mean by stealing your time. So, basically, he worked that whole time or partial of that time as a slave. He did it for free. He did it for free with the guise of being paid for doing that, compensated, and he was not compensated for that. So, that's a big concept to wrap your head around, that you are ultimately working for free when these governments print your money and your purchasing power away from you. So if that happens, you work and you get $10, but at the end of the day, you can only buy $1 worth of things. 90% of your time and energy was just stolen from you silently. And I think taxes are silent. Taxes are more in your face, but the money printing is the insidious silent part. So that's how time is stolen from you, and you become the new age slave, my opinion. And Bitcoin fixes this.
Absolutely, Bitcoin does fix this. And you just mentioned right at the end there about money printing and how that's related to stealing you of your time. Can you go into a bit more detail around when you say money printing is related to the loss of value of the currency and hyperinflation, like what happened in Argentina? What is money printing?
Sure. Basically, money printing is the act of actually physically producing more physical money in the world, on the market, right? So we get into a case where the debt is in the country is astronomical, and the debt in the private sector is astronomical. And now we are less liquid. So they start to print up money to get the economy moving and getting people to spend money. That's why they do it for the most part. Now, I don't want to go into all the mechanics of why that is, because one, I'm not an economist, but two, it's more simple than that. Since, just take this example, for the last 100 years, the dollar has lost over 90% of its purchasing power. That's the US dollar. And we are the world reserve currency. So imagine the other currencies, right? So the same thing is happening to us, the inflation, the hyperinflation, but it's slower. It's a slow motion coup, right? So in Argentina, they might feel it fast in a decade or less. I know friends who've been through 3 different currency collapses in Argentina. The Bitcoin libertarian, shout out to you, brother. But in America, we feel it slower because we have the hegemonic liberty of having the world reserve currency. We're the king of currencies. We're the king of money, right? So it happens slower. If we catch a cold, the rest of the world catches a fever. That's what they say. So if we are losing 90% of our purchasing power over time, imagine what happens to everywhere else. Now, that's the important thing to think about, your purchasing power. You might have more fiat or US dollars nominally, but that's just monopoly money, because what you can buy with that has severely dropped, right? So does that make sense?
Absolutely. And An example of that showing up in the real world in real basic terms is when you're at work and you go to get lunch or you're going out for drinks in the evening with your friends. You might be getting paid slightly more, but the difference that the price of those goods and services that you're paying for are drastically outpacing any increase in wage that you're getting. So everything is then
Right,
feeling more and more expensive.
right. And put it in the real world terms, like you just did, just to double click on it. My mother bought her house for like $27,000, $27,000. That same house is now worth maybe $300,000 to $400,000, but it's still for the most part in the same location, which is the most important thing, location. And it's in the hood. It's not in an incredibly nice neighborhood or anything. And, is that house 20 times more valuable? I don't think so. It's not at the price of utility. That's why Bitcoin will slowly start to eat into real estate and real estate investment, because it just doesn't make sense to own a property that you have to pay taxes on, take care, repair, insure. First of all, the taxation part is ridiculous. You're paying taxes on something that you own outright. If you paid for the house outright, why are you paying taxes on something that you own? Which is ridiculous. And they're even doing that with car ownership now in Virginia. The United States rebelled against England for a 2% tax on the tea. We had a revolution for a 2% tax. Now we're getting taxed 20, 25, 30, 35%. And we just feel like we've been lulled to sleep. Like this is normal. This is not normal, people. We have to wake up and realize there's another system. We can exit this system. This is actually evil. This is actually an evil thing. And just like you said, real world wages aren't keeping up with the inflation, the increase in pricings. So since 1971, wages are basically stagnant. They're almost flat compared to everything else. Housing, education, healthcare. Oh my God, healthcare in the United States is atrocious. We especially in America, we get lulled to sleep thinking that we are exceptional, we're number one, and America is the top at everything. But this is not the 1970s. I think we're operating on a outdated software globally, but especially in the West, that things are the same as they were 50 years ago, and they are not. And it's getting worse and worse. This is basically a Ponzi scheme. And they say Bitcoin is a Ponzi scheme, but the fiat dollar system, which is debt based, and the money printing, like we just discussed, that steals your time and your purchasing power, is a Ponzi scheme because it needs money printing. It needs to steal a little bit every day from you to exist. Bitcoin doesn't do that. As a matter of fact, it's a win-win. Everyone who adopts wins, as opposed to the current system, which is a zero-sum game.
Yeah, whoever's closest to the money printer wins in the fiat system. Whereas with Bitcoin, like you said, everyone wins. And I always like to say, relating to the story about housing that you said, if you actually think about it, if you buy a house, let's say you bought a house 5 years ago and did nothing to it, you just lived in it, it's actually becoming less valuable because there's going to be cracks, there's going to be damage to the house, yet the price is going
Yeah.
up and up. So that is right in front of your eyes. Why is the price of your house going up in value when you're damaging it and it's actually losing value?
Look at cars. You're not going to pay more for a used car unless it's some kind of limited edition special. Soon as you drive that car off the lot, you lost 10%. That's what used goods are. The houses have become some kind of form of money, and that's not right. Houses should not be money. Money should be money. You should have the prices of homes slowly reduce to the value of its use or utility. And that's what Bitcoin will do as people start to realize, what Bitcoin is. And I think that's the really tough part, to understand what Bitcoin is, because people own Bitcoin, but they don't really understand what it is.
Yeah, and I had a massive wake up when I came across Bitcoin because I was just taught growing up to get your foot on the property ladder as quickly as possible. And that was the way to be successful in life. And then when you start measuring house prices in Bitcoin, as we know, the prices are just going down and down at a rate that if that was the case in fiat, it would be a housing crisis and a recession if you measured it, how it's getting cheaper and cheaper in Bitcoin. We'll probably touch on houses in a bit because it's a big topic with my generation. I think a level of programming into the way to go about life. Just if we could quickly rewind a bit, going back to Argentina and financial collapse and hyperinflation, I often share statistics around the US debt and other countries flirting with hyperinflation. And whenever I try and link that to the US or to the UK or to Australia, people say I'm crazy. So would you mind talking a bit about your perspective of the direction that we're heading in and what that could look like for currency collapse in the bigger countries?
It's just like Larry Lepard says with his book, The Big Print. You know, the big print, the big money print is what he's referring to. And that's coming because it's a feature of the system. It's not a bug. It's a feature. In order to keep this machine going, they have to print money. And that means if you have $1, now you have $2 chasing the same amount of goods, hard goods, resources, commodities, you know, real things like Bitcoin and gold. So if you listen to Ray Dalio, he's even clear on this, even though Ray Dalio, he's kind of on the fence about Bitcoin, but he does bring it up. He's saying we are in a cycle, a debt cycle, and we're nearing the end of that debt cycle globally into where it aligns with another book. I'm bringing up all these books, but The Fourth Turning. It coincides with the fourth turning, which is a point of great generational change that happens around every 80 years or so. And, you know, we have these, it's evident, we have these things like Bitcoin, we have these things like AI coming on board and, you know, new breakthroughs in genetics and things like that. They're all converging. Robotics going crazy, you know. In 10 years, there'll be robots everywhere, like humanoid robot androids. All of this is converging and the new paradigm is emerging. At the same time, this Ray Dalio debt bubble is happening. And it's just obvious if you're looking at it. So we cannot continue with the weight of the debt that the United States has combined with the global debt. All we can do is print money. And if you pay attention to historically, we don't just add 10% or 20% or even double. We exponentially have to grow the money supply to manage the debt that we have accrued. So if we printed 4 trillion last time, this time we have to print 8 trillion. If we print 8 trillion this time, next time we have to print 16 trillion, you know, and so on and so on. So what does that do to the average person who's working at Walmart or the convenience store? You know, it gets very dystopian and it gets very, you know, instead of steak, you have to eat worms for protein and bugs and things like that. This system does not benefit you in a health as an average person, because that's what my show is about, like the real hard truth about what's going on in the world and with money and why Bitcoin is the solution. Because day to day, most people don't have the time or bandwidth to think about these things, right? They just know it's getting worse and they don't know why. And that's true for America, and that's true for Guatemala, and that's true for Cambodia, China, and Japan, all around the world. So the average person is hurting more and more. As a matter of fact, we are at income inequality levels that have not been seen since 1929 great stock market crash. And we're even above that. So imagine that. The income equality is greater than the 1929 stock market crash, the greatest crash of all time. That's where we are now. So it's not sustainable. The only thing they can do is print money, and we see where that goes. So we're at a catastrophic point, in my opinion. It's hard to tell when it's going to happen. That's why we have the term black swan, because we don't know when. But we're at a point where it's gonna pop, and when it pops, it's gonna pop hard. And we gotta have to realize that Bitcoin is the lifeboat to this Titanic.
Absolutely. And they're great book recommendations, so keep them coming. And I think with that convergence that you're talking around with Bitcoin, AI, technology, Jeff Booth, Price of Tomorrow, another book, sums it up really well, because I speak to
Brilliant.
people and they think that these things are considerably in the future. But when you can start getting your head
Right.
around exponential growth and how fast these things are developing, when you say something like, there's going to be robots everywhere in the next 10 years, most people will think you're crazy. But people don't understand how quickly things are really developing. In the US, there's now self-driving Ubers. For those that didn't know, like, it's here. It just needs to get scaled now.
Yeah.
And throughout that, you can hear the severity and urgency in your voice. But just to really lay it out as simply as possible, how urgent is it that people start realizing this and actioning it? Because again, a lot of people that I'm speaking to are aware, but they're not acting with urgency. So from your perspective, where do you think things are heading?
Yeah. Yeah. Of course, it's of the utmost urgency, especially for the people that are not in the top 1%. You know, you might be in a middle class situation, quote unquote middle class, but that's rapidly deteriorating. And it's already really been deteriorated because, just like I said, the income equality levels are off the charts. So if it's really bad in America with the income inequality, where the CEOs are making 200 times what a worker makes, you know, back in the day, 70s, it was only maybe 10 times. You know, a CEO would make $1 million a year compared to the average pay of maybe like 40,000. Not even. Back in the 70s, it was far less than that. But now it's 200 times at least. You know, if you're a CEO of a Fortune 500 company, you're making tens of millions of dollars a year, right? And there can only be one CEO of that company. And the company will have thousands of employees. And that's just a subsample. You know, most of the economy is small businesses, and small business owners don't enjoy those benefits of a CEO from a Fortune 500 company. So if you're like the rest of the 95% of the world, you don't have it like that, right? So it's urgent that you change your situation. And your situation is most people can't afford a $500 emergency savings. Most people cannot save, right? Saving has become uncool, and saving has become stupid, honestly, because I say stupid because it doesn't make sense to save your money if it melts like an ice cube. So if it's melting like an ice cube, what do I do with it? I need to invest it. All right. Now I have to learn about stocks and all of this stuff. I have to learn about macroeconomics. I have to learn about bonds, CDs, and things like this. And you have to have your work, your 9 to 5, and then you have to have your 5 to 9 as an investor portfolio manager, right? Right. Yeah. And you have to research these companies and look at their prospectus sheets and all this stuff. Bitcoin fixes that too, because you just have to buy Bitcoin and save it. And it made it a good thing. It's a good thing now to save. So even if it's very urgent. Even if it's 10% of what you make, you save that. They even say that in traditional finance, save 10% of what you make. But you're going to want to ramp that up when you can. But even as just a average worker making minimum wage, you need to start saving in Bitcoin. You better start saving in Bitcoin. It's of the utmost importance, because that small fraction of Bitcoin that you bought and purchased. And remember, you can buy a fraction of Bitcoin. It doesn't have to be a whole Bitcoin. People have that unit bias, or just in your head because you don't know any better, that you don't have to buy one whole Bitcoin, which is over $100,000. I don't have that type of money, right? Oh, no. No, you can buy $5 of Bitcoin right now. Get on the Strike app. I'm not affiliated, but it's a great app. $5, $10. Boom. Set it a weekly, I say. Not monthly, because the market swings up and down and you can miss some of the lows, which you want, but you want a dollar cost average into Bitcoin, which is basically buying at a set interval and collecting that, because the stats show that it beats trying to time the market. If you're trying to time the market, you're going to miss it. So it's more important to have time in the market than timing the market, right? Most of the gains of Bitcoin happens between 10 and 20 days out of the year anyway. So if you didn't perfectly time those 10 days, you missed all the gains. That's why you need to just keep stacking, right? And then have a longer time preference when you're stacking. And you'll see that don't follow the noise of the up and down, the price action. That's just noise. Look at the yearly low. The yearly low of Bitcoin is steadily stair-stepping higher and higher. Your time, your energy is being respected more and more and being saved and preserved, as opposed to melting like an ice cube in the fiat world. So if you can't afford a $500 emergency, you need to figure out, one, how to make more of these fiat cuck bucks, and two, learn how to start saving at least 10% of that into the new system, Bitcoin, which will be your lifeboat when all of this collapses, because it cannot sustain. So it's very urgent.
Yeah, and hopefully you guys can feel that urgency because the clock is ticking. But to your point around saving, before Bitcoin, I was a terrible saver because I didn't see how it was benefiting me at all. Yes, I had an emergency fund, but beyond that, I was trying to save for a deposit, or so I thought, for a house, but it wasn't getting anywhere. So then quite quickly, my savings consistency went out the window, and instead I was going out partying, having fun in the moment, because I didn't see the value of saving my fiat, saving my pounds. Bitcoin actually made me a way better saver, because when you understand Bitcoin, and initially when you just see Bitcoin and number go up and that's all you see, before going down the rabbit holes, you start questioning, well, I want as much of this thing as possible. So then you can start building that consistency. And like Caliph said, dollar cost averaging, Strike's amazing. I use it too. And for those that don't know, and Caliph, I don't know if you know, but I'm doing a 75-day hard at the moment, Bitcoin edition. And part of what that includes is a daily buy of minimum 2,100 Satoshis. Now, the reason that I've done that is to show people that you don't need to buy a whole Bitcoin in one go. And you can buy as little as one Satoshi, which is less than a cent, I believe. But 2,100 Satoshis is less than a cup of coffee a day, but that's set over a long time period. Whilst right now isn't a big amount, that's going to start and that's going to get you in the game. So at least you can see there's a brighter future ahead.
That's brilliant. You're doing that, huh? Every day you're buying?
Yeah, so it's kind of combining health and Bitcoin. So 2 45-minute workouts a day. One's got to be outside at least. 4 liters of water, 10 non-fiction pages. And then for the Bitcoin stuff, it's minimum 2,100 Satoshi daily buy, and then sharing a Bitcoin thought, whether that's direct to someone or if you're posting on social media, posting that. And then my goal to start with, and then the goal for anyone that joins, is that you get someone else to join you doing the 75-day hard. That can be any point throughout the 75 days, but then it creates a snowball effect where you've got a bunch of people getting healthier, stacking sats, and sharing the message to help other people. It's tough though. The fitness side is tough. The stacking is easy because of Strike.
Yeah. Yeah, and do you set an automated purchase, automatic buy?
Yeah, so I just have each month I'll deposit a lump sum of fiat into Strike, and then each day it will do 2,100 Satoshis. that's just what my stacking is for the challenge, just to show, because I didn't want to do big sums and again scare people off. But 2,100
Right.
satoshis, pretty much anyone can do that, and it's a set and forget, like you said. You just set it on strike and watch your account grow.
And right now, 2,100 satoshis is about $2.50, right? Give or take.
Yeah, it's not much at all.
Yeah. So a very approachable amount that in time you will see the benefits. And I think that's the part of the dollar cost averaging. It happens over time, and you need time to understand what Bitcoin is. You have to hold it for a certain amount of time. It's the time chain for a reason. And once you hold it, you start to see how it interacts with the rest of the world, how you interact with the rest of the world, how you understand, well, opportunity cost of purchasing this new iPhone as opposed to putting that in Bitcoin and waiting 4 months, 4 years. Maybe I don't need to update my iPhone right now. Maybe I don't need that extra, frivolous thing, buy a new car just to look good, keep up with the Joneses. And you start to assess things more and live a more kind of minimal type of life, I believe, because consumerism is the debt trap. Consumerism is the slave trap. That's what I believe. It's the perfect capitalism debt slave trap, is to be like that. That's what we were sold in the 80s with the Reaganomics, is like, he who buys most, he who has the most things when they die wins. And then, you have all these people with houses full of junk in their garage and treadmills that they don't use. It's like crazy. And for an
Yeah,
extra amount of money, it'll like splooge on you or something. Like, you don't need all of that, people. Just stack your Bitcoin and you'll start to understand what's needed and what's not.
yeah, absolutely. And if you actually speak to people that are driving the Lambos or have all of the materialistic things, they all say,
Yeah.
once you've got it, it's nothing special
It's
and quite quickly wears off.
nothing. After a month, it's just your car, right? The feeling dies, everything dies.
Yeah. Yeah. And it buys you, like, for me, the way I look at it now is, like you said at the start, time is the most valuable asset and the scarcest asset in the world. And without time, you don't have anything. But one of the
Right.
biggest shifts that I had was, well, saving in Bitcoin is buying me more time. And I would
Hmm.
rather have more time to spend with family, more time to do podcasts and share the message to help other people, and be driving around in a Lamborghini than be going on all these amazing holidays. I would rather have my time and control my time
Hmm.
than any of this. And to your point on spending, I set myself a rule when I first got into Bitcoin that I was never going to sell it. And how that ended up benefiting me was, I was a massive impulsive spender, and I'd see a new pair of football boots or rugby boots, or I'd see the new iPhone, like you mentioned, and I'd just go and buy it. But when I started saving in Bitcoin and I set the rule, I'm never selling my Bitcoin, this was when I first started. When I got that impulse, I had no money in my bank account. I had no currency to go and buy the thing. So then I had to think, do I actually want it? Then I'd wait a few days, because if I was going to want it, I'd have to go out and earn that money and save it to buy. And then in 2 or 3 days, you realize, oh, I didn't actually want that thing. It was just an impulse.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and the other thing, not that I was a hoarder or anything like the story you were telling of these people that just have houses stashed of stuff, but I used it to clean up everything I owned, because I'd go around, do I need this? No, sell into Bitcoin. My car, do I need this car that is probably more expensive than what I should have anyway? No, sell it into Bitcoin. And it quite quickly, like, I think people that are potentially struggling financially right now, if they just go around their house and just put everything on Facebook Marketplace, that's a good start to start getting some Satoshis and getting in the game. And like you said, just building up an emergency fund more than anything. That's the start, and you get in the game. So to close off this kind of topic before we then maybe touch a bit on actually on Bitcoin. How do you, for those people that don't see the urgency in this and just keep going through with their everyday lives, going through the motions, how do you see that playing out for these everyday people, especially the young people?
Well, it's kind of like I just said, if you don't start to pay attention to what's going on, and you have to, and I don't fault anyone. Like I said, I was like 30 years old or older before I realized what money was. You have to know what's going on. It's just, it's part of life. It's part of life. You want to know what's really going on. You have to have your paddle in the water steering your ship, or the stream of the river is just going to take you wherever it wants to. Start paddling, directing your own life. Start being the captain of your own ship. And that was ever increasingly harder and harder to do with this current system, until we get to this point where it's hard to keep your head above water so that you can even think about like what Bitcoin is or what money really is. You're just living day to day. Now, you know, I say to my son, he's Gen Z, I'm Gen X, that I tell him the stories about the $27,000 house is now 300, 400,000, 500,000. The average house is about 450,000. Now it's higher, I think, 500,000, $500,000 for a house. Before, when I was younger, they used to say, pull yourself up by the bootstraps, young man. You know, you can do it. Pull yourself, hard work, determination. Well, it's not the same as the 1970s. It's not the same. UCLA college tuition was $5,000. $5,000 for UCLA. That's one of the biggest schools in America and thus the world. So right now it's you're going to spend $250,000 for a college education for any reputable college or university. You're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars, not $5,000 a semester. It's like $30,000, $50,000 per semester now. So what do you say to that when the houses are $500,000 for my son and healthcare is astronomical and the cost of eggs are like you have to take a loan out and people are putting groceries on their credit cards, and before one single worker could make or earn enough to hold down one household, have a house, a wife, two kids, and a dog, that's from one single income to now we both have to work or we're not even going to be close to making it out here. I think that was stolen from us. So this generation is facing far more challenges than even I had. And are you Gen Z?
Yeah, Gen Z.
As well. So you're a Bitcoiner and you are of that age group. So you know the challenges that you're facing now, but might not have an idea of how it used to be. It wasn't like this when I was young. And it wasn't like this, especially for when my parents were young. It was not like this. So if you did have a job and you worked hard and you got a good job, you wasn't a rocket scientist, you wasn't a physicist, you wasn't like a CEO or hedge fund manager in Wall Street. You just had a good job. You could hold down a house, pay the mortgage, have a family. Now people are not having families because they're scared they can't afford it. They can't afford to have a baby. They can't afford to have a family. That's horrible, right? You can't, that's the number one imperative mission for in our genes is survival and procreation, a continuation of the species. We can't even do it. We feel like it's like detrimental. And in some ways, the society is like making you feel like you should not do it, right? With all these alternative ways of thinking they give you now. But what that has stolen is the traditional core family. Now, the mom cannot take care of her children because she has to go out and work overtime. And she gives the children to someone else to take care and raise most of the time while she is outside working. And the higher ups, the people in charge, the elites, the club that we are not in, they love that because that's more taxation. That's another paycheck that we tax, right? Not just one person household, one income household. It's a two income household. Now we just doubled our workforce to achieve their dreams and goals and fund their wallets and their vaults and their, Scrooge McDuck vaults where they jump into mounds of money and gold. So it's destroying what like the core atomic family just to be hyper capitalized. Hyper capitalization is destroying the core family. So the only thing that we have to fight this is Bitcoin. Look around. There's nothing else that can fight this. Bitcoin is the only thing. Bitcoin is the most punk rock thing you can do. Bitcoin is the most badass thing you can do, the biggest revolution you can make in the world, the biggest protest you can do is to buy and hold Bitcoin because you opt out of the monetary system that is killing you and doing everything we just talked about, destroying your purchasing power, stealing your time, turning you into a debt slave, robbing you of the atomic family and the joy of offspring and having children and a good life. And they want us to be alone, stuck on our phones, just looking at our phones. Yeah, I don't want to go outside. Just, I order Grab and they Uber Eats, they just throw the chicken nuggets right in the window. Yeah, this is great. We don't have to talk to each other and see each other and meet each other. Just, I'm on Tinder and, whatever. They probably don't even meet up. But it's dehumanizing. And I think Bitcoin brings that back by removing all of that evil, I believe. I believe it's evil. So that you don't have to focus on all of that. You just have to do what you want to do or do what you can or do what you're good at to earn a living, save it in this Bitcoin, which respects your time and your money and your life energy. It respects it. It's the only currency, money, that does that on the planet. I give some credence. I give some props to gold, but this is the new age. And Bitcoin is the largest, biggest revolution that we could possibly join. Opt out. Opt out, people. Opt out right now. The young generation, opt out because when you're young, Gen Z, look at me, pay attention. When you're young, you don't have a lot of money, but what you have a lot of is time. When you're old, you may have a lot of money, but what you don't have a lot is time. So with Bitcoin, the beautiful thing about Bitcoin is it shares one of the greatest phenomenal things in the world is compounding interest. Compounding interest is like the ninth wonder of the world, right? So over time, Bitcoin is projected to have between 30 to 60% compounding interest yearly over time. So in 20 years, you could have a very different outlook. You might even be able to be financially secure if you have some kind of income coming in now that you can start building your future for. And, you know, we get caught up in the money of it all, the money of it all. And some people don't like that. My Buddhist friends think money is like the root of evil or you shouldn't worship money, and you shouldn't. And I think Bitcoin allows you to remove yourself from that rat race and allows you to breathe and think about the things you like and enjoy your family. And you start thinking about a longer time horizon. Maybe I can have kids now. That'll be great, saving in Bitcoin. I have a future. There is hope. It's not dystopian. And I believe a lot of the new generation feels like there's not much hope. And the birth rates are declining and collapsing. And it's reflected. It's not hard to see if you look. So I implore people the younger generation to study Bitcoin, study why it was created, because that's the opening to the rabbit hole. That's the opening to your awakening. That's the opening to your future and understanding of how to get there and not be caught into the trap that myself, like Gen X, we're dead in the middle of that, that this evil empire, evil empire. that we have to escape, and Bitcoin's the only exit.
It's interesting you bring up the stay-at-home mum or the one income provider, because I was on a podcast yesterday and we're talking about, there's a problem when you tell someone your vision that your partner is going to be a stay-at-home mum and bring up the children, and they laugh at you because to them it's not possible. Something is wrong with the world when you can't see that happening in your life.
You can't do the normal, natural thing of the mother raising the children, or even a stay-at-home dad. You should be able to raise your own children. Hello. We shouldn't have to hand them over to the government or someone else to raise them. And um, as a human being, someone with consciousness and awareness on the planet, you're alive. You're only alive for a blink in the grand scheme of things. What does this blink mean? Well, if you don't have the family and the children and the love and the laughter, but you have to go work at your Amazon job 10 hours a day, 80 hours a week or whatever. And then the commute, that's the thing that killed me when I was in New York. The commute was 3 hours a day. I'd be on a drive to the train station, take the train to the city, get off the train, catch 2 subways to connect to my job, and and then do it all again. Work long 10 hours, 12 hours a day, and then do that long commute all the way back home, train, subway, car, feeling like cattle being herded. And it's just like so dystopian. I keep saying this, but it's like cattle being herded. And it was so soul draining that I just had to get off that hamster wheel, and I just had to jump off. I don't know where I'm going to land, but I cannot stay here. I don't know where I'm going to land. I might go bad, but I just cannot stay here being herded and my soul being sucked and drained like this. So Gen Z and millennials and alpha, I implore you to understand what Bitcoin is, because it's a protocol for money. It's the new protocol for the new monetary system. Just like HTTP, just like the internet is a protocol, just like SMTP is a protocol for email. You don't know how it works. I know you don't know how it works. I have an idea how it works because I'm in computer programming, but you don't need to know how it works to send your Instagram post, upload to TikTok. You don't need to know how it works to enjoy it. But Bitcoin, you need to know how this works and why it was created. The education part is extremely important, or you're just going to sell it. You're not going to be a good custodian of Bitcoin. You're going to sell it into fiat, and then you're back into the fiat trap. You have to understand what you own. That's the important part. Like, so many Bitcoiners have Bitcoin and they don't really understand its freedom technology. It's not just number go up. It's not just money in the bank. It's freedom technology. It's security. And it opens up all those things I was talking about. A future. Oh, it's hope. Don't take that lightly. I have hope. People they unalive themselves because they don't feel like they have hope. That's a big thing. It dictates how you move in this world, how you interact with people. Are you a nice person? Are you bitter? Are you angry? Are you biased against others because you feel a certain way? You feel cheated in life. People that are in control, they want the people that are lower class monetarily to fight and bicker amongst themselves so they don't see the grand scheme. And when you start to understand Bitcoin, you see the grand scheme quite clear, but it doesn't come immediately. You have to study it. You have to hold it for some time. And then you understand all the world's a stage.
Spot on. You do have to study it, because otherwise you'll just be straight back into those fiat games that you're currently in. So if you're listening to this and you are doing a 3-hour commute every day to work, on the 3-hour commute, put some headphones in and listen to some Bitcoin education and educate yourself, because it can truly change your life. I'm mindful of the time, and I've absolutely loved this and having you on. So thank you for jumping on. The question I like to always end with is for those that have been listening and things are starting to make a bit of sense, or they're interested in Bitcoin, or they're interested in learning more about the problem, anything in this space, what's one thing you'd recommend for people to get started into the Bitcoin journey?
First, take whatever little money you have. Instead of buying McDonald's, buy some Bitcoin because it's going to make you look at it more. It's easy to not look at it or ignore it if you don't have it. So, if you have $100, put it in a Bitcoin. If you have $50, put it in Bitcoin. I don't care if it's $10. Buy $10 of Bitcoin right now. Go on Strike, Coinbase, wherever you want. I don't care. I like Strike, Swan, River. They're Bitcoin only. Do that. Second thing is, because you're going to be looking at it, you're going to start to wonder what it really is and why do I even hold it or care? So you're going to start paying attention, right? Now, there's a lot of books that you can read and learn about. One of the greatest is the Bitcoin Standard, but I think it might be too dense for the average person to just jump right into to understand. There's simpler books out in mind. Yeah, we didn't know about this at first. I was not Satoshi. I was a computer developer, so I had kind of a edge in that regards, but it's far bigger than computer programming. You don't have to understand. You don't need to understand the computer programming part to understand why you need to start. Like Bitcoin is everything you don't know about economics and money, times everything you don't know about technology and science, right? But you don't need, that's not what it was created for. The tool is to create more freedom. And I really started learning via YouTube. So start watching videos. It was Mike Maloney, it was Max Kaiser, it was Andreas Antonopoulos for me. He never spoke about the price of Bitcoin. He spoke about why Bitcoin, and as you advance down the rabbit hole, you start seeing other creators like Finn that you might relate to more, and he can explain it to you in a way that I can't or Andreas cannot. So, and then one of my most favorite orators, the poet laureate, I call him, of Bitcoin is Michael Saylor. He can talk in terms of why Bitcoin exists and make analogies to his physics background on why it's a perfect system that does not leak your financial or life energy through space and time. But that's a little bit further down a rabbit hole. As an introduction to it, you need to just know why it was created. And it'll bring you to the 2008 crisis, financial crisis. And the debt, like we discussed, was part of that global calamity. And they had to print their way out of it to kick the can down the road. In reality, the financial system broke that year. But we printed, and Band-Aid, 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 and hold this thing together and put lipstick all over this collapse. But guess what? It's already broken. Lyn Alden's book, Broken Money. You know what? That video by Lyn Alden, it's a video with visual representations of her core concepts in her book. It's kind of based on like what Ray Dalio did. It looks similar, but it's visual and it's explained in a very digestible way. Broken Money by Lyn Alden on YouTube. I think it's brilliant, and it's almost 1 million views. It's translated in many languages. You can use AI to translate it. I think that's a great start for someone. Go buy some Bitcoin. Go watch Lyn Alden's Broken Money, and it'll start sending you down the rabbit hole of why Bitcoin, why it's Bitcoin, not crypto, and why you need to start now to save your future and build a family, have some kids, eat some steak, go work out, get some sun, touch some grass, do the good thing, get back into nature. They want to take us out of nature. They want to stop us from having families. They want to stop us from touching and talking to each other and connecting and making real connections. Bitcoin fixes this. It fixes a lot. It's much more than people think it is.
Go down the rabbit hole of no turning back. Exactly what Caliph just said. Man, thank you so much for coming on. I'll drop them in the description along with the videos and the books that you recommended. But where can people watching this that resonated with your message find you, follow you, watch you?
Great. You're probably watching this on YouTube. So if you're on YouTube, you can just go to Real Hard Money Podcast and check me out, like and subscribe. Leave some comments. I'd love to hear some feedback. Hey, I saw you on Finn's podcast, so I figured I'd check you out. I love to make new Bitcoiner friends. And on X, I'm at Real Hard Money. And those are my main two places, but I'm also on Nostr at Real Hard Money. You know, you could go, I'm on Primal, so primal.com/Real Hard Money. I'm easy to find. I'll give you my hash for people so inclined on Nostr as well, so they can find me as well. But yeah, thanks so much. Also, we got a lot of videos coming up and we have a lot of great guests. Maybe Finn will be on my podcast later sometime. Yeah. And yeah, come check us out. Come check us out.
Awesome. Cool. Guys, thanks for watching again, and I'll see you on the next one.
Take care.